Hey guys, it's Chris here. Just wanted to do another video while I'm down here working on this obsession, and it's got me thinking about some different topics and that you read about a lot, but you really never see a video on, and that's cam lean and how you tune a bow with cam lean and what it does and why do bows have cam lean, and that's important to understand because you read a lot of times that it's bad, and it's really not. Excessive cam lean can be bad because it can cause the bow to derail, but most bows today don't have that problem. So I thought I would just do a short video, maybe 5-6 minutes if I can squeeze it in there, and kind of explain what the cam lean does, how it affects when you shoot, and kind of what you're looking for if you're going to jump into really in-depth tuning. And I'll talk about both bows, my this Obsession M7 and also my Carbon Spider 34, because although they are different cam systems, they do kind of work somewhat the same as far as the way the bow likes a little bit of lean, and I'll kind of touch on that too. So again, I just thought it'd be helpful to kind of say, here it is, this is what you do, rather than write it out and then be a bunch of questions. It's probably easier to understand when you look at it in a video anyway. So let's get going on that topic. And why does a bow have cam lean? And a lot of people probably know this answer, but it's because the cable guard is offset to one side of the string and to one side of the cam, which the string comes off of. So there's a lot of load on these cables, especially at full draw. There's more tension on the string at rest, but as you pull the bow back, there's a lot of tension on these cables. And during the draw cycle, this cam, it moves one way or the other depending if you're right or left hand. And on this particular bow, this is a right-handed bow, as you draw back, the cam moves this way. And so I like to refer to it from the back of the bow. So the cam is going to move clockwise. And that's why at brace a lot of times, when people check cam lean, the cam is kind of leaning this way. And that's what you call like pre-lean. And that's as you draw it back, it turns this way. And you really want the cam to get as straight as possible at full draw, and you can't have a little bit of lean at full draw, and some bows shoot better like that. But that's why the bow has cam lean. It's because of these cables being offset to one side of the bow, and there's tremendous force on these cables. So to offset that, a lot of times you look on the axles of these bows and you'll see these shims, and every bow has some type of shim almost. I know on Matthews they call them top hats or whatever you will, but there's varying thickness of these shims, and what you can do is you can move the cam back and forth on the axle, and that affects the limb load and which way the cam and how much lean it has, because as you move the cam towards this cable guard, it's going to reduce this load. So what's going to happen is it's going to have less lean at rest, and as you draw it back, it's going to have more positive lean this way. And it's just something that's easy to check on the draw board, which I do recommend if you want to jump into tuning. Everyone needs to have. But that's what it is. And the magic number is to find out for your rest, for your arrow, spine, for your setup, your grip, where does that cam need to be in the power path to keep it straight as possible. And I like to refer to that as basically the center shot and that string motion being straight. Because what happens is when that bow is at full draw and the cams are one direction, if they're straight and they want to go back to leaning at rest, that string is going to move from one side to the other, and that's referred to as lateral knock movement, and which is this way. And the key is to just find out where it's going to be the straightest for your setup. And that's not always easy to do. That's a lot of trial and error, and that's what tuning is all about, is to find the magic spot. That's why I like to do bare shaft tuning, because it tells you pretty quickly which way that arrow is going. And again, when we could jump all over a lot of topics, but I took a few shots here because when I set this bow up, I did a video before. I've since changed the cables and strings on this bow, and I did that because I wanted to have a custom draw length on this bow, and my draw length is 28.75, and I like all my bows at that, and I can tell if it's an 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch long or short either way. So what I did is I had some custom cables built, and I knew when I did that the draw weight was going to go up on this bow because I shortened the cables and I made the string longer. And it got the draw length exactly where I wanted, but it did shoot the weight up about 5 pounds. So I backed it back off a little bit to get it back down to 70 pounds, But when I did that, it did put a little more stress on these cables. The limbs are a little more preloaded now, and so it made my bullet hole that I had, like the bow came from the factory, to a severe right tear. And I didn't have any shims in house, so I called or texted with Todd Jones at Obsession, and he's going to send me some. But I was like, let's look at this thing. And I started looking at the shims, and I said, well, I'm just going to switch them, reverse what I got on here. And that took maybe 5 minutes in the bow press, and all I did was take both shims. I took the big one on each, and I moved the cam that way on the axle. I moved it closer to the cable guard to reduce cam lean at brace, because when you have a lot of cam lean at brace, if your cam is leaning a lot and you have a right tear, that means it has too much. So you want to basically take lean out of the system at that point to try to straighten it up. So I just flipped them and I shot, and I was never done that on an Obsession before. I was like, well, who knows what's going to happen, but the cams looked really straight when I did that. And it almost shot a bullet hole, and I was like, wow, that was pretty easy. But now it's got a little bit of a left tear. And so that's fine, because the cam is really straight now, and it's got a very small left tear. So all I need to do is get the shim pattern right to make it have a little more pre-lean and a little more lean, so that that full draw is straight. And it's not very bad. So, I've been reading about these bows and people that shim these bows, and they say you always shim the top and the bottom together. But I tell you, I'm not going to do that. And I will make the next video after I get this back. And I say that because for some reason, and it may be the deflection of these limbs, the bottom cam has a little more lean than the top. The top is really straight. The bottom is leaning about what I would expect out of a bow that I normally shoot, including my Hoyts too. So the bottom has more lean. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shim this top cam a little this way to give it more lean and see if I can clean up this tear. Because then I think the cams are going to mirror each other almost exactly, and I bet this thing shoots a dart by making one change only to the top cam. I'm not going to do the bottom, which, I mean, like I said, I've read that most people say do both and make them match. I don't know if that's right, but I know that because of the load to where this cable guard is and the way it pulls these cams, this bottom cam has more lean than the top. And so I'm going to try and make a match, because this being a dual cam bow, and see if I can get it that way. And it may not work, but I bet it does, because that's really all you do on a hybrid cam, which I want to grab real quick and make this short too, because this is probably getting long. But on a Hoyt specifically, on a hybrid cam, there are shims on the bottom, and I very rarely ever have to change these. These limbs are much narrower, the pattern, than on the Obsession. And for my setup, I know that I always like the thick spacer on the cam side of the bow, and that makes the cam straighter. And it may just be because of my grip. And so that's really one of the first things I do. If I get a bow from Hoyt that's not like that, I set it up that way. But the same thing, other than like the Obsession, when you have a yoke bow, you can control this cam lean with the yokes, and all you're doing is basically moving the axle this way, which leans the cam. So it's a little easier and a little quicker to just spin one of these yokes. That is true, but you still have to go through that and find where it wants to be, and if you do change systems or harnesses or whatever, you got to go through all that all again. I know it pretty well, so I can normally get it pretty close just by putting a set on and measuring the lean actually with an arrow. And I'll do that. You guys have probably seen this 1,000 times if you read about tuning, but an easy way that you can check this is just to take an arrow and lay it flat on the cam and see kind of where it's running in relation to the string. And as you can see here, I hope you can see this one doesn't have a lot of lean. The arrow is right behind the loop. But if you check the bottom cam, which is hard to do because of these speed knocks, you would see here that, I'm going to put it on this side just for reference, you would see here that it actually has more lean than the top, which is pretty common on most bows that I find. It seems like the bottom cam always has a little more lean at brace. So, you can't really micro adjust this one. You can on a Bowtech, which is really cool. The overdrive binary system is a really tunable system that you can do top and bottom with yokes. But on the Hoyt you can't. You're really left to the top. But again, all you're doing on a bow is when you find that spot is just to get the string as straight down the center shot with that arrow combination in your grip as possible. And when you do that, then that's kind of they're kind of money, if you will. But But that's why bows have cam lean. Again, you can see this one here, same thing. The roller guard is off to the side as opposed to the string, and it's pulling those cams and everything to one side. And when you draw it back, same premise. But hopefully that helps you guys understand. I am going to put the camera up and show you this piece of paper here that I shot. I'm going to mention one thing. My tear was probably about that big before I flipped it, and you can see it got to not a bad tear. And I'm going to point this out. I have 2 bear shafts, and this arrow here, I put this up for a reason, and I haven't put it on the spine tester, but it must be a bad shaft because it tears awful. And then I have another shaft that shoots a little better, and I've spun the nocks around on these and shot them in all different directions, but this looked like a pretty good tear up close, so I backed up, and it's still, you can see, it's kind of mimicking, that's kind of a little high left tear, which is not, that won't be hard to get out at all. I'll probably barely have to shim this obsession over to get that out, and that's why, again, I'm just going to do the top on this bow and not the bottom to see if I can get that little bit out, because this would probably still shoot a broadhead fine. I mean, but I'm just very picky, obviously, and I'm going to get that out. And then I will make another video if that doesn't work, and I'll shim the bottom cam, because you can do both and find a happy medium, or you can do one, I think, and make it do what I want it to do. So hopefully that answers some questions about cam lean and the way it works. And oh, last thing, forgot this. You see this a lot. People say, which way do you shim a bow when it's tearing? And this is a left tear, and so what you do on the cam, this is the cam, you follow the tear. So what I want to do is move the cam this way. So if you have a right tear, you want to move the cam this way on the axle. Left tear, you move it this way. And on a yoked bow on a Hoyt, if you have a left tear, you want to twist the left yoke and untwist the right, and what that does is it leans the cam a little to the left. So this video ended up being a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but hopefully that was some good information for you guys. And if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about, hit me up. Thanks.